Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being here. It's an honor to sit with you, absolutely. And yeah, salute your courage. You're now writing a book set in Lebanon, and these are short stories. They're fictional. And yet, in a way, you're going back where it all began. Tell us where you were and where you came from.
Well, I come from the city, and I left it in 1985 because I was kind of tired of the impasse that people were not moving forward. They were stuck, and I just sensed they wanted to be stuck. So I wanted out of their stuckness. And where did I go to? Beirut. And did I get stuck? So it was a kind of an impulse or weariness that, and I had an interest in Palestine, the Palestinian issue. But I thought in going to Beirut that I was en route. I wanted to go to China, and this was a way to get to China. I didn't get to China when I wanted to, but I did go to China afterwards. So I kind of left Belfast looking for something and didn't know that I was going to find it in a hole in the ground in Lebanon. But that's what happens. If you're hungry enough for something, it will come to you, but it might not come in the way you want it to.
I want us to go back even further to your book, I Tell Me Mama, which is, of course, your memoir of growing up, where you write about your imaginary heroes on one hand and warplanes, but also of the nightmares you suffered. Were you worried about another set of nightmares returning when you decided to write the stories set in Lebanon? And do you think they might come back?
No. I think the nightmares I had as a kid growing up were part to do with growing pains. They're also part to do with a kind of an unhappy family background. But the nightmares that people ask me about, which you're referring to, is the nightmares of going back to a place. I've been back to Lebanon 4 or 5 times on my own and travelled around it. Didn't experience any nightmares. I like Lebanon. I like Lebanese people. I love Lebanese food. I didn't get it for 5 years, but I love Lebanese food. But Salil, I know what you mean. I don't encounter nightmares. I kind of, when I decided to go back to do this, I was watching the kind of blanket bombing of Beirut in 2006. And I had previously met the then Prime Minister, and I had met him at a conference in Derry about dealing with conflict. And I was very impressed by what he said. He wasn't then the Prime Minister of Israel. He did become, and he was obviously the one that gave the imprimatur to go and bomb this place. And I thought, something's being stolen from my history, which I haven't any control of. There was a part of me that belonged out there, and it wasn't the hostage thing. There was a part, and I thought, I'm going back there. I read an article by one of the finest Lebanese writers that I know, Elias Khoury, who was, and he wrote this article about, if I can remember and kind of paraphrase the thing that stuck out to me, he said, there are hundreds of stories lying about the streets of Beirut and the hill villages of Lebanon, if people care to pick them up. But what he was talking about was that there's a flaw in the kind of the Lebanese or the Arab mind that is ineffectual about telling its own story. And what he was saying that there's one narrative that prevails in the Middle East, and it's an Israeli one as opposed to a Jewish one. Um, uh, uh, I read in his stories this kind of plea for, people to tell their own story. So I got audacious and decided, well, I'm going to do that. So I was putting in my mind that this blanket bombing of Lebanon, where I used to teach, and thinking, look, the young men and young women I taught were not terrorists. I don't know whether they're dead or whether they're alive. And Israel didn't care either. And I thought something was being stolen from me, more than it was being stolen from me when I was the hostage. And I wanted to go back. And the imperative came from those lines from Elias Curry. There are stories lying about there, people care to pick them up. So I decided to be arrogant and say they're my stories, as much as they're an Arab story, a Lebanese story. And that's what I went back to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this, you've written about it in a non-fiction form, and now you're going to write it in a fictional form. Is writing in fiction a deliberate act to step away from reality? Or is it to write the truth that facts cannot portray? I mean, I was talking once to the Sri Lankan British writer, Ramesh Gunasekara, where he said that fiction writers have it easy because we can make stuff up.
Yeah.
But you guys have to be factually right. Now, those who believe in fake news narratives will say that no, journalists also get things wrong, and they of course do. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying they don't. But there is an expectation that when you write non-fiction, you're writing about things as they happen. But fiction liberates you. So what prompts you to get back there, and why do you choose fiction rather than reportage, for example?
If you want to tell a story, all my books are about going on journeys. The best way to go on a journey is let the story tell itself to you. Mm-hmm. So I went out there with this idea of stories, about stories lying about the streets. So whatever happened when I was there became the story I was going to tell. But on the thing about fiction, and you use the word liberation, I think facts are containers, they're information vehicles, but the writing of fiction, whatever it is it connects people on emotional, on heart level, mm-hmm. and tells a greater truth than the fact can do. And we all know what's happened to facts now. So I think the writing of fiction, I'm quite confessional in the way I write. It makes a bond with a greater truth than fact can. Mm-hmm. And we all carry that knowledge in here somewhere. And I suppose the job of a fictional writer is to get into the hard place, mm-hmm. where greater truths are told and facts will tell.
I suppose, in a way, facts are the bricks that take you to a point, and fiction lets you leap across, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. When I was constructing this idea of this book that I'm writing, was to go to a place and tell, here's where I went to and here's what I saw, and then say, this is what struck me. And then I write the story about the thing. So, yes, everybody has to find a source in reality or an engagement with reality. But to understand it to yourself and its meaningfulness, which you urgently want to convey to others, fiction is a vehicle.
Now, I want to go back to the time in captivity and how you cope with it. I mean, you've already shown that when we started talking about it, in your first few sentences, we had two bursts of laughter. Humor was very important, of course, to get a sense of perspective. But was it religion? Was it belief? It was dark. Where did you see light? Where did this inner courage come from?
Didn't know I had it. Mm-hmm. But no, when these things happen, you just deal with what was happening. I had the arrogance when I went to Beirut to think that I was invisible. So there were mortar rockets were coming across from Israel or going across the other way, and everybody in the street was carrying guns, like everybody in the street. And I thought, well, nothing to do with me. I'm Irish, nothing to do with me. And look what happened. You know, when you think you're invisible, you're not. Courage, I don't know about that word. All I can tell you is this happened, and I'm thinking, well, my first thought was, when they bundled me in the back of the car, I thought, brilliant. This is going to be great. The next dinner party I go to, it's going to be great. Thinking they'll release me in a couple of days. They didn't. But things begin to happen. Look, you're in a cell. It's 6 foot long by 4 foot wide. And there's a sloping ceiling, so you can only stand up at this end of it. So you don't get out of that place. Well, they take you out to go to the toilet and they bring you back, and that's it. So what happens is, whatever all your kind of resources that you think you have, just don't mean it. So you have a kind of psychological and emotional breakdown, which is kind of slowly terrifying. And then something else happens, because it must. You find the capacity to say to yourself, this is where I am, this is where it is, I have to deal with this. But you have to acknowledge what's happened to you. It's like candle melting, and all this kind of melting down of your personality. And what you're left with is who you are and what you are. And you have the added benefit of saying, you know that these guys can come in and shoot you. 2 of my colleagues, Lee Douglas and Peter Padfield, were murdered 2 cells down from me, and it was very unpleasant. I remember watching, looking underneath the door. You know, in the Arab world, there's kind of, you have to leave an airspace, and underneath the cell, I could see the feet and the blood trail, and I knew who it was. And his execution wasn't clean; it was filthy, the way they were. And I remembered, and then something happens when that being dead isn't important. It doesn't matter. You go to a kind of place where that measure of life is irrelevant. But it doesn't come quickly. You know, it's kind of, when you go down to the bottom, you have to climb up. And what you climb up to is meaningfulness, to a degree that I had not known previously in my life. If I put it to you this way, best way to sum it up. About 3.5 years into my captivity, my captors give me a copy of the Quran, because they have to, they're obligated. But it was an English transliteration of the Quran. And I was reading through it. But the point was, so you're reading through this book, and you go to turn the page, and then this guy comes down and whacks you across the head. What's it? And you're blindfolded on, so you're reading it like, and bang across. Holy, don't touch. Well, you give me a book to read, what do you mean? And it says, I can't remember the surah it comes from, where the prophet is talking to his followers. And he says to his followers about the taking of captives or hostages. And the prophet says to his followers, give them, i.e. the hostages or the captives, give them the Quran, that they may take with them more than was taken from them. And a kind of, I'm not a believer in all this, but that's what happens. You know, when you lose yourself, you find yourself in a kind of a richer way, a more meaningful way. And like, I don't believe in the Quran. I don't mean I don't believe in the Quran. I just find that that's what happened. you know. But for the people that kept me, you know, that they might take with them more than I took from them. They murdered these two friends of mine, you know. And I thought, well, I thought about this afterwards when I came home. That's what happened. I came home with more than was taken from me. So, to Islamic Jihad, thanks a lot, you know. But I suppose all that capacity is in us. We live a life where we're not allowed to find it because we're busy with all kinds of other things. So people, you know, have this kind of richness inside themselves. But I'm not asking everybody goes on holidays in Lebanon to find out about it. It's just that it's there, and you're sometimes fortunate to find this. The way to find it is not particularly pleasant, but the rewards are, as the prophet says, if you come home with more than taken from you.
You said something very profound yesterday when we were talking, that the more they beat me, the more alive I felt. I wrote it down when we were speaking. Do you want to?
Yeah, okay. It's very hard to talk about, but
you don't have to. You don't have to.
No. It's just that I have to be honest. So you're locked up there 24 hours a day, and so your sense of yourself is just dwindled. I remember when I was writing I remember sitting there, it was morning time, because I could hear the call to prayer. And then as they come into the cell to take me to the loo, so sunlight came in, and all I remember was the dust motes, you know, in the air. You know, when sunlight hits the air, you see all these little tiny particles of dust kind of floating about. And I thought, the dirt and the filth here is more important than I have. So you're down that kind of low and absolute. And it's not easy to get out of that. And they'd come in and then beat you. And which wasn't pleasant, but in a kind of a way, you have to kind of flip that some way. And this is the hard bit to explain. The more they beat me, the more life I had. And sometimes when they didn't, I used to hurl myself against the wall to give myself a sense of myself rather than being less than the dust motes floating in the air. So it sounds terribly self-sadistic. It wasn't. It was just a way of giving myself back to myself. And I really didn't care about the beatings. They weren't pleasant, they were hurtful and pain. But to get this kind of, some people would call it perverse, I don't. I just found it brought me back to who I was, give me a kind of starting line to begin at. And then the other thing, Sally, was that, you know, this happens for a long time, and there's an exchange happens that, you know, in the Arab world, and I'm not being presumptuous about this, where face is very important. So to them, they'd be coming in and beating, and in a perverse way, you were kind of enjoying it. You weren't laughing when it happened, but they sensed, you know, there's a sensory world that happens in these, that he's not going to be whatever they thought I was going to, you know. Bruises and bloody marks go away, humiliation doesn't. And if you participate in your own humiliation, you're going to have to deal with it for a very long time. Anyway, but an exchange happens where the captors become the prisoner, and the captured person rises to, and they become enraptured by something, and they become the prisoner. That's not something I would have understood in my own consciousness, but this is it happening. And the corollary of all that is, am I so very different from them? You know, they're just human beings, so am I. Look, I come from a troubled community. And I thought, before they took me on my holidays, and I kind of sensed, you know, they don't know. But then in this horrendous, angel-fearful place, a power exchange happens. And they sense it, and you sense it, and it's something that they have no control over, but you have, because you know it better than they do. I hope it's not very complicated for people. It's just the best way I can explain it. Here's another thing that it's just hit me now.
Yeah.
I know we talked about this. One of the so we're into the fourth here, called Salil, said to me, I had a fight with him because I didn't really care, and then he said to me months and months afterwards, Brahim, they used to call me Brahim, couldn't say Bran for whatever, or they mixed me up with Abraham, I don't know, but Brahim, and he put his hand on me and his arm and he said, we are all prisoners here. And I thought, that's quite a profound thing for this young man to say. But we'd been intimately together for 5 years, and then he comes out, we are all prisoners here, almost as if he was saying, I'm sorry. You know?
Yeah. No, and you know, in a way, when we were talking yesterday, you said you were not too keen to go back to the past, and you have very graciously and courageously done that. But it reminds me of a story from another human rights defender, Han Dongfang, who's Chinese, and he was arrested after the Tiananmen protests, and he's one of the leading independent trade unionists now living in Hong Kong. And he said that I don't want to talk about what happened because there is a tomorrow that we need to fix, and we need to work on the newer stories to tell. And then you made an allusion to that famous line, you know, that past is a foreign country. So is it a foreign country? Is it a country you've left, you don't want to go? Is there a new country you want to reach?
I'm not trapped in the past. And the past is another country for me, metaphorically and really. But I went back there, but not to exercise ghosts. Although, surprisingly, you know, you find these ghosts that so I went back with an idea in my head. I remember, so, yes, it is another country. It doesn't play on my consciousness. I don't. But I discovered a lot of things there. So I suppose going back to write the stories that Elias Khoury talked about, was to find the pearls that were there. And I've come back about 4 times. And I remember an article by Bob Fisk, he was writing about this. And I know Bob Fisk very well. And he began this article by saying, I told him I'd been back and travelled on my own, and then he went, whoops, what? And he began this article, Keenan is a hard man. And like, that's a Belfast expression, and the man worked here, so look, when you find this touchstone in yourself, you'll go to the ends of the earth to find it again. So I thought Lebanon owes me something. I don't know what it is. I just felt, and then I felt this anger about what was happening when Olmert, the then the president of Israel, whom I had met previously before, and thought the way he talked about listening and sharing and all that, and then he just bombs Ehud Olmert. So maybe, I don't know, what it owed me was waiting there for me to go and pick up. And nobody was going to stop me getting it. Not Ehud Olmert and his bombers, and not Hezbollah and all. And when I do go back, I have to go to Hezbollah headquarters and say, I want to go to the south. And they go, so happy, meaning journalist. And I say, no, I'm not. I tell stories. And they go, what? Passport. And you give them your passport. And they Google it. And they go, and they come out and they go, Mr. Brian, welcome. Where do you want to go? We will look after you. Like, no. Done that. No. We've done that for 5 years. No. So, and these young men now, obviously, they weren't involved. So, but it's got to do with the face thing. They think I'm a hero. I'm not. I'm after something that they didn't know they gave me. And it's mine, and it belongs. And I just want to get the debt that the place owes me. And what it owes me is the stories. And I have to work at them. Yep. Other stories, and I have to make them and write them in a way that you and everybody else that might read them might get a glimpse of another place, another people, another culture, but who are just the same as you and I, because we all hurt in the same place, we all think in the same way. I'm not talking about propaganda, religion. There's something that binds us, and that's the intention.
Yeah. You were describing yesterday, I mean, I'd asked you about what would you tell your captors if you were to meet them again, and you tried to imagine him and describe him, what drove him to do what he did. Could you extrapolate a bit on that?
I've thought about this a lot of time, and even when I was back travelling around, living on my own, I kept thinking, was it you? You know, was it your dad or your uncle? Or, but that's a kind of trite way of saying things. If I did, and I think I met one of them once, who stayed away at a great distance, but his eye contact suggested to me who it was. Because I remember just looking at him and I went, and he just went, and that was it. And he went off stage, and but there was one called Saeed whose violence was kind of pathological, who enjoyed it in a strange, perverse kind of way. And I think, well, if I'm sitting in a cafe in Beirut and Saeed comes in and says, I'm Saeed, and I would know him because he had crusader blue eyes, which when he was intoxicated with violence, the colour of the eyes changed into a kind of electric blue. And if he came in, I didn't like the man. But if he came in and said to me, hi, Brahim, Mr. Brian or whatever, I am Saeed. I said, okay, let's have a cup of coffee, Saeed. And if you've come to talk to me, okay, I want you to do something for me. Saeed, tell me what you were thinking or what you were feeling when you were doing to me and other people what you were doing. And if you can do that, and if you will do that, Saeed, I can set you free. And that's what I would say. Because Saeed was a very troubled man, and the only person who's going to set Saeed free is me. You know. So that's what I would want to say. Well, I hope I would have the capacity to do it. I don't know if I'll ever meet Saeed. I think Saeed's dead. You know, people who are intoxicated by that kind of pathological thing about violence are dead anyway. So death's going to come to them, whether they go and blow themselves up on a suicide vest, or whether they go out because they want to die so desperately. And maybe that's what possesses this psychopathology about. So I don't think I'll ever make it, because I think Si's dead. But if I did, or any of the others, that's what I would say to them. Tell me what you were thinking, what you were feeling when you did to me what you did, and I'll set you free.
Yeah. You have these 10 commandments, the 10 things you have learned, the 10 things you taught yourself. Can you talk about, then we'll throw it open. Yeah.
This is going to take a while. In all kind of religions, the Christians have the 10 commandments, the Buddhists have the Noble Eightfold Path, Muslims have whatever they have, but this kind of, and Judaism has the same thing, the standard rules and regulations, which is supposed to guide your personal growth. And I've come home and thought about it a lot. I'm not religious, but we all need kind of guidance lines. And I thought, well, what have I got? What did I get from this? And I got my own 10 commandments. And I've written them down, and I'm going to get through them as fast as possible. So, commandment number 1. To err is human. Accept it. That we're flawed, we make mistakes. Admit it. Apologize to ourselves for it and to the others we cause offence or hurt to. By doing so, we negate the need to support immoral actions. We refuse to be conscripts into kind of elitist ideologies. All this hurt in the world comes from people who think collectively that they know more than anybody else. So if you begin with that, because all my commandments are about me and the journey into me. Number 2, be mindful, be vigilant, and be a resistance fighter. Refuse to give into a kind of automatic pilot. People think that people have to do this and they have to do that. They don't. Don't accept outworn rhetoric and obsolete ideologies. Employ critical thinking. Be mindful, be vigilant. And imagine the end game scenario of whatever actions you may partake in. Be critical thinking of a future. Number 3, commandment number 3, I'm responsible. Taking responsibility for actions and decisions puts you in the driver's seat. My whole kind of time there was about taking possession of myself, not letting it being taken away from me. So that begins by being responsible and self-responsible about yourself. Commandment number 4, I am me. Don't allow others to individuate you. You are not an object, you're not a category, you're not a number, and I was none of those things when I was locked up. Dehumanization provides the killing ground for bullies, rapists, torturers, tyrants, whatever. So insist on being you. You're not subject to their dismissal, their individuation. Don't be lured into it. Commandment number 5, don't be lured into by acceptance. We're all social animals. We desire acceptance. That's part of what we are. It's a powerful kind of impulse within us, but it also can be very counterproductive. People can use it. Loyalty to things is a malleable thing. I grew up in this community and I watched how malleable ideologies are. We live within our own minds. Every single person in this room does live within their own minds. In a kind, if we choose to examine it, in a kind of solitary splendor. We have to assert our own independence and refuse to sacrifice personal morality even if it kind of hurts us, or even if society rejects us. You know, society is all made up of individuals who don't know the power of their own individuality. So that was, you know, commandment number 5. Commandment number 6. I get asked all the time about forgiveness. I don't understand it. So commandment number 6 to me is be vigilant. And if we're vigilant, we don't need to work through this thing about forgiveness. Things are not always as they are portrayed. We need to look at the picture inside the frame. We need to see the whole total. And then, I like paintings, and that's why I'm using this analogy. Then when you look inside the picture, inside the frame, and what's going on there, you find that it's bigger than just what's contained within the frame. Do you know the famous painting? I can't remember it, where Jesus is being taken in the Garden of Gethsemane. And so everybody knows the story, and the story is... But then when you look at it, there's a naked man somewhere running through the bushes. And what's that about? You know, so it's kind of being vigilant, being aware, thinking, participating with awareness. 7, to balance time. Sometimes or a lot of times we allow ourselves to be trapped in a situational moment. We must refuse sometimes and often to go with the flow, because it's not made from us, you know. So you need to ask yourself, how will I view my present action in future time? In future time, will I feel guilt, remorse, anger, or whatever, because we're emotional beings before we are anything else? Will shame invade us because of what we've done? So I think we need to understand that we're the moral arbiter of the kind of tick-tock of time passing. And because we need to be aware of what we do now and what we're going to feel about it later. I went through that process for a long time. You know, when your personal history comes back to invade your mind, and you think, oh my God. And that was harder to deal with than being smashed in the face by the end of a Kalashnikov, because it was mine, it had nothing to do with them. So this thing about being aware of a time consequence of my actions, how am I going to feel about what I'm going to do? Anyway, commandment number 8, do not sacrifice personal or civic freedom. It's yours, you made it. It was first given to you before laws were written about anything, and it belongs to you, and you're the lawmaker. Nobody else is. There's a thing here. This Faustian conflict promises you will be safe from harm if you surrender your freedom. That's a patent lie. You will never be safe from harm if you surrender your freedom. Because guess, you all know, without me extrapolating the logic of this, what's going to happen if you surrender your freedom. Number 9, I will oppose unjust systems. Because as we work through these 10 commandments, I talk about responsibility and personal freedom and choices. What I learned in a place where I didn't have any choice about anything, that choice is the crown of life. And without exercising choice, you're not participating in life. You're dead anyway. So, because this gift of choice, which is yours, doesn't have to be dictated by anybody else, is a special gift to each and every individual. But its purpose, I think, is to oppose, to stand up against unjust systems. I was talking years ago in Jersey of all places, and I said to this young woman who was an actress that, you know, social justice is, because I just come from, you know, the people who were locked up in Jersey during the Nazi occupation, and they ended up in concentration camps, and they ended up there. And I said, you know, social justice is the most important value that we can engage with, you know, and we can only engage with it from here. We can't be told how it is. So I'm going to finish quickly. Number 10, the last commandment. Unjust authority is not acceptable. There's a difference between respect and obedience. Understanding that difference will reduce our mindless obedience to self-proclaimed authorities. The priorities we have for ourselves is to understand difference between respect and obedience. And the first thing we have is respect for being alive, for being who we are. And it doesn't matter where you are or what happens. If you kind of respect yourself and respect other people. And respect is a very, very powerful thing. Obedience, I just think, is submitting to the dust motes floating in the air. So to finish, I was walking around when I was coming here today, and I went out to buy a book, my own book. And I was walking up Howard Street, and you know these things, signposts, you know, trying to tell people, travellers, about you know, the history of the place. And there was a phrase about a man within, be aware of without. And I thought, wow, that's a meaningful way to end, because that's interesting, because that's my understanding. A man within what's within, because there's kind of riches within, but be aware of what's without. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a book in here, as you can see.